35 psychiatrists sign a letter to disable Donald Trump. Posted on Wednesday, February 15, 2017. Written by Mediterraneo Digital. A group of 35 psychiatrists have decided to break the usual silence of mental health professionals on public figures in a letter to the New York Times. In the letter, they warn their compatriots about the serious emotional instability of the new president and warn that he is unable to serve our country safely. The letter has also been published on the website of one of the signatories, the Dr. Lance M. Dodds, an addiction expert and emeritus analyst at the Boston Society and Psychoanalytic Institute and a former professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. To the publisher. Charles M. Blow, column, NYTimes.com, February 9, describes Donald Trump's continuing need to crush the opposition. As mental health professionals, we share Blow's concern. The silence of the country's mental health organizations is due to a self-imposed dictum on the evaluation of public figures, the 1973 Goldwater Rule of the American Psychiatric Association. But this silence has resulted in a failure to lend our expertise to concerned journalists and members of Congress at this critical time. We fear that too much is at stake to remain silent. Mr. Trump's speech and actions show an inability to tolerate opinions different from his own, leading him to angry reactions. Their words and behaviors suggest a profound inability to feel empathy. Individuals with these traits distort reality to fit their psychological state, attacking the facts and those who transmit them, journalists, scientists. In a powerful leader, these attacks are likely to increase, as their personal myth of greatness seems to be confirmed. We believe that the grave emotional instability indicated by the speech and actions of Mr. Trump makes him incapable of serving with certainty as president. I personally, Diego Rodriguez Menendez, would like to remind those psychiatrists that Donald Trump has won a democratic election in the USA and is a person who has achieved much during his career. And that of being true this in Spain would be a clear crime of revelation of secrets, or other crimes on the part of the psychiatrists. Obviously, it would be appropriate to evaluate this issue to the government or other constitutional institutions. And to start. Of the environment of President-elect Trump. That of those psychiatrists is a clearly criminal behavior. Either they intend to seriously and recklessly reproach the President of the United States because he is the candidate to whom they have not voted, or it is a crime of at least disclosure of secrets. Those are not the doctor's ways of proceeding with the law in hand. Nor with the code of ethics of Hippocrates. But tactics that could be rebellious as conspirators. This is the reason why many do not understand that, for example, deputies or members of government are apportioned. Let's say that they rule the PSOE and Pedro Sanchez. And to carry out any vote, give instructions as the cusp of the general administration of the state from the Ministry of Interior, Health, Development. So that a preventive arrest is made retaining 15 deputies the day that they have to vote something important. Or they artificially artificiate a procedure from sanity to conclude that the president of the opposition is schizophrenic, incapable. Or you are held on a motorway. For that they have some prerogatives like parliamentarians, magistrates of the Constitutional Court, members of the Royal House etc. And cannot be detained except in case of flagrante delicto. For example. Even so, some plays are played by some without being reproached after. I do not find it difficult to venture what would happen if the members of the constitutional organs were not assessed. The listeners to the ex-Minister of Interior D. Jorge Fernandez Diaz left in all the media when they were few days for the elections in 2016, and many continue to believe until the present day. But in those hearings the ex-minister did not give any instruction. They had also called him and said what was right for him. Well, go ahead with your fiscal investigation. I think it's wonderful. Then it turned out that he was receiving chemotherapy at the time. The prosecution did not consider this matter. Of course, after this, these psychiatrists who want to proceed through the press to incapacitate the President of the United States, is that they do not know of the problems that are real in each trade, of the capacities in the real world. Not incapacity of our rulers. Or they will be forgiven as always. Nor do journalists interpret constitutions well when they publish. But according to democratic standards these doctors act in a criminal manner. Diego Rodriguez Menendez, Oviedo, Spain. Source: Miguel Palacios Frugon, Doctor of Psychiatry and Professor of the Universidad Complutense de Madrid. Megalomania is a psychiatric illness characterized by the fact that the individual who suffers from it has the conviction that everything he says, thinks, or does is great. It is suffered by vain individuals with an overvalued ego who have a marked complex of superiority. The megalomaniac feels contempt for others, sees them as inferior beings. His egotism is so great, that they sarcastically refer to everything that is not himself. In its interior is a fearful and as an attack defense mechanism. In other words, inside is complex, frustrated and fearful. Because of the fear of being overcome, he ridicules every being who feels threatened. With his actions he harms everyone he believes are a threat to his ego. According to psychoanalytic theories every megalomaniac is Narcissus. For this scientific current the daffodils are in love with itself. The term Narcissus comes from Greek mythology. This tells the story of a being so beautiful, who spent looking at himself ecstatic in the reflection of the waters of a lake. He was so enraptured with himself that he ignored the many beautiful nymphs around him who libidinously wanted to mate with him, but they could not do it because Narcissus was only in love with himself. According to Sigmund Freud, all Narcissus is homosexual. It is a fearful one who needs to surround itself with relative stupid ones so that they flatter him and thus to feed on his greatness. According to Vallejos Nájera's treatise on psychopathology, relative stupidity is a picture that describes the fact that a relative stupidity always needs several relative stupid to adulate. The personality of the megalomaniac is described in psychiatric psychopathology. Those who suffer from it have grown up in a life full of resentments. Generally they have suffered the absence of one of their progenitors. The association of the suicide of the father or the mother as a causal factor of a psychological trauma that generates the phenomenon is very frequent. The complexes are part of their pathological personality and are conditioning aggressiveness as a defense mechanism to prevent their internal fear is discovered. The dynamics of this process is given as follows. First there is the psychological trauma, then the resentments come, then the complexes are formed, then the fear appears and finally the aggression appears as a response mechanism to hide the entire previous chain. They are individuals with a great deal of physical activity. Sing, dance and appear to be very nice. They smile constantly and try to be the center of attention of all circumstances, but without allowing anyone to look in the same space. As they are always surrounded by stupid relative or lamb ones, they become false leaders who by their fiery temper drag others. Their vital force compels those around them not to express opinions because otherwise, the anger that the megalomaniac develops against their enemies turns against those who dared to contradict it. The megalomaniac admits no questions. People revolve around their desires. Their ancestry is based on the false conviction that they are beings destined to perform feats of greatness. They do not admit a discrepancy with those who do not think like. They resort to any legal or illegal scheme to eliminate them. They are very emotional, they have a histrionic attitude. The teacher Agustin Caso defines by histrionics the people whose form of expression is characterized by the drama that they put in everything they do. They can laugh with surprising ease, to immediately assault whom they believe are a danger to their ends. They have a thought characterized by a paranoid ideation. According to the psychopathology of Palacios, the paranoids are subjects convinced that anyone who does not think like him, is because he wants to harm. Have ideas of damage, prejudice, and persecution. They are convinced that they have enemies, are these real or imaginary, who want to kill or harm them. They think that all are in permanent plot against. They assume the role of victims, or injured to justify the execution of their revenge, which is an overlapping way to disguise the fear given by their opponents. They also suffer diathesis explosive. According to Henry Hay, it consists in the explosive manifestation of an aggressive reaction disproportionate in relation to the insufficient stimulus that triggers it. That is to say, the megalomaniac for any small cause develops exabruptos of aggression without proportion to the cause. If he is reunited with several people, he will react violently by assaulting, beating, or expelling from the place who he thinks he has lacked respect. Megalomaniacs are a danger to society. They are a terrible threat to the coexistence system if they handle some kind of power. To greater power, greater damage caused. They forcefully impose their ideas and subdue those around them and leave themselves. Since there is no way to control them, at some point they will also attack those who are at their side. For his paranoid ideas will eliminate them. The main characteristic of megalomania is that it has no cure. There is no psychiatric, psychological, pharmacological, hypnotic, surgical, clinical, alternative medicine, magic or any kind of treatment that can control and worse cure those who have this problem. While it is true that the megalomaniac is somehow harmed by his suffering, it is far more true that the greater the damage he causes to others by his suffering. Disculpe, doctor. But I see that psychiatrists come to say, with doctrine in hand, that it is better to kill, maim, or incapacitate Donald Trump. Since megalomania has no cure and in this case will be harmful to society. The sciences think they have to be objective. But are generalized cases in which presumed knowledgeable as it is in this case you doctor in psychiatry and professor of the Complutense University of Madrid. University with very good references, but in fact it is evident that it is also a focus of anti-system of rebels against the Constitution, against the structure and institutions of the state and public order. They pretend to believe in the pathologies they describe through their publications in magazines, in toxic and expensive drugs, an industry in which most of the psychiatrists they publish have investments, or by labeling those suffering from these pathologies as defenseless characters or public figures. As if they had come or someone to their inquiries, if their families, or friends, affirm that certain beings suffer from a full appraisal of characteristics, which will always be recklessly interpreted as contemptuous public opinion, although they do not have to be, are pathological, nor have they ever bothered to clarify in public that they are largely involuntary, dealing with scientists nor exposing a rational series with the pros and cons of social skills and consequently a minimal way of approaching patients of the supposed pathology of this group that I no longer believe there is. Since they are not criminals, it means that nothing can be done against them. And what do you want to do then? Do not attack criminally but do not enjoy the dignity of human beings? That is, a cast of virtues like humans, miracles of life. As when they say that there is not a fool of these criminals that are in the universities, where there are organized real attacks and there is no action. Rather it seems that it is shown that they regard the highest authorities as subhuman enemies, not sick, who with the sadism described to them want to annul or eliminate social life. And why do administrations pamper psychiatrists and have made them millionaires? If it has never been known of cases of patients who have really done their, experimental therapies, and are unhappy, apart from the patients who cheat and chew on their imaginations, are sometimes allowed to coerce individuals with their own lives with impunity, and are psychiatry personnel rather always those who do not know nor respect norms, such as the rights of the patient, or the right of a mentally ill to live their own disease and not the almost always coerced patients? If Donald Trump was a really aggressive and powerful and not decent person, they would be overlooked like college students. It is clear that they sell smoke but also foster moral unreality or indignity. They call health and be socially integrated to pure clientelism and simple tyrannical friendliness that from criminology for me is the root of the corruption of modern societies, divorces, vices, hedonism, colgitas, sex, alternating, mixing words and even spirits. Yes. Promote this and complacency's tyrants. But not family and social cohesion. before they prefer that at 40 a patient has 2 mancerones of friends. To allow him to be centered with his labors sedating without reason, to help his family, or to make small, big challenges that give a more complete meaning to his life. The reality is that, far from seeking cohesion in the patient's society, as public officials, they prefer to psychoanalyze urging, valuing, or deepening the judgments, or prejudices that their single loved ones or their neighbors can do to them. Getting drowned in their miseries without pretending it more than you to continue to pay more consultations. Defending currents of conduct that blame and make bad view, as is the case of the megalomaniac patient, great virtues such as tolerance, respect for those who have authority, who by nature carry himself with the consequences of his actions, since they are public. The silence and stillness, yes, that we find in the first class of the airplanes. Let's not talk about Air Force One, the talent of a leader, not solar to laugh, and the volitional capacities in brief. If only during working hours and necessary for the benefit of a community, since it seems stupid to think that a head of a democratic state would take his work as a game or a whim. And I'm not the psychiatrist, but a law student. Was not the protagonist of 12 Angry Men also a megalomaniac for those tyrants on the jury of that cult-serving movie? Just because they are completely antagonistic virtues, I say those of righteousness, to other pathologies, are these also pathological? For the democratic norms, which are the ones that the same society wants, do reward those virtues. Because only people like this are capable of keeping democratic institutions functioning, just as the gangs of friends like those rich physicians find it harder to find in the legal system. But for democratic forms, of course, we have the case of your long-awaited patient Donald Trump, or whoever is elected according to democratic rules. Not those who do not know how to perform their work ethically and without crime when no one asks. Well, to publish this link article. Stupid by dogmatic, without objectivity or sufficient scientific rigor, and have been able to arm of license to sedate, well sedated, anyone, whether elderly or children. Because, let's go, who are you going to stuck with those inhuman qualities like this author who describes and classifies, and is going to be treated with toxic drugs? And what is the harm that the patient would do if, for example, he snatched himself by asserting his dignity in a rational and characterful way? That is necessary at times. Depends on whom we treat. Clear. But not aggressive. In addition to legal, where does the gag law take us with cases like that of these professors? Because having the character that can have what is colloquially called a penguin is legal, unless, as now is punished in Spain, effectively and exceptionally, who intimides, is an official. Either want to mutilate, incapacitate, or undo your rights fraudulently. Since then we would find it difficult to prove to the lawyers a state of necessity, criminal exoneration, first of all an arbitrary administrative procedure against a citizen. Written by Diego Rodriguez Menendez, Oviedo, Spain.